I said pull it up now.
Officer, you don't have a warrant.
Stop resisting and do what you're told.
You're not authorized to access that information.
Don't play games with me. Point it to the screen right now.
I can't do that without
Don't make this harder than it needs to be.
I'm following store policy and
Dispatch,
law.
this is Braddock at the Meridian Mall. Need another unit at Portico Outfitters.
Cam footage starts mid-argument. A police officer is already raising his voice inside a retail store in a mall in Marietta, Georgia. Customers have started to turn and look as he demands access to store records without a warrant. What he doesn't realize is he picked the wrong person to try it on. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because the next story is one you don't want to miss. Officer Cole Braddock, 34 years old, had been on the force for just over 9 years. Most of that time was spent doing patrols in commercial areas like this, malls, plazas, and retail districts. His record showed a pattern, several complaints over the years, mostly about how he handled situations involving civilians, excessive force, unnecessary escalation, and repeated accusations of biased treatment. None of it had stuck long enough to remove him from duty. Inside the mall, his body cam is already recording. "I said I need those records," Braddock says, his voice loud enough to carry across the store. The woman standing behind the counter doesn't react the way he expects. Nylah Kemi Adebayo, 29, works as a senior sales associate and floor supervisor at the store. Part of her role involves handling customer transactions, returns, and access to internal purchase records. She's trained on data protection policies, company compliance rules, and what can and cannot be released, especially to law enforcement without proper documentation. She stands behind the register, one hand resting lightly on the counter, the other near the store terminal. "Officer, I've already explained," Nylah says, keeping her voice steady. "I can't give you access to any records without proper authorization." Braddock steps closer to the counter, his boots heavy against the tile floor. "Proper authorization?" he repeats. "You think this is optional?" A couple of customers near the display racks glance over. One of them slowly picks up an item but doesn't move away. "This is store policy," Nylah replies, "and it's also the law." Braddock leans forward slightly, placing one hand flat on the counter. "No," he says, "the law is what I say it is right now. You're interfering with an investigation." "What investigation?" Nylah asks. He ignores the question. "I'm not going to stand here arguing with you. Pull up the transaction records from earlier today. Now." Nylah doesn't move. "I can't do that," she says. His jaw tightens immediately. "You can't," he repeats, "or you won't." "I won't," she corrects calmly, "not without a warrant or a formal request." That word again, warrant, it hits the same way. Braddock straightens up, looking around briefly like he's aware people are watching now. Then his attention snaps back to her. "You people always want to hide behind paperwork, like it changes anything." Nylah's expression shifts slightly, not surprised, just more focused. "I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm following the law." "You're obstructing," he shoots back. "I'm not. I'm doing my job." That answer clearly irritates him. Braddock moves around the side of the counter without asking, stepping into the employee area. The shift is immediate. It crosses a line. "Sir, you can't come back here," Nylah says, turning toward him. "I can go wherever I need to." "You don't have permission to be in this area," she says. "I don't need permission," he snaps. He steps closer to the terminal, glancing at the screen like he's trying to figure out how to access it himself. "Log in," he says, pointing at it. "Open the records." "No," Nylah says. It's direct, firm. That's when the aggression becomes physical. Braddock reaches out and grabs her wrist, not violently, but firm enough to stop her from stepping away. "I'm done asking," he says. Nylah immediately pulls her hand back. "Don't touch me," she says, louder now. A customer near the entrance stops completely. Another pulls out their phone, not fully obvious, but noticeable. "You're making this a problem," he says, his voice dropping slightly but still tense. "All I needed was cooperation. And all I asked for was legal justification. You're not in a position to demand anything," he says. "I am when it involves protected information," she responds. He shakes his head again, pacing once behind the counter like he's trying to control his frustration. "I've dealt with this before," he mutters. "Same attitude every time." "What attitude?" Nylah asks. He doesn't answer directly. Instead, he gestures toward the computer again. "Last chance," he says. "Open it." "No," she says again. There's no hesitation. That's when everything shifts. Braddock stops pacing. He looks at her for a second longer than before, not just irritated now, but calculating. Then he reaches for his radio. "All right," he says, pressing the button. "I've got a non-compliant employee refusing to assist with an active investigation." Nylah watches him, her expression steady, but more alert now. "And we're going to need backup." Braddock keeps his finger on the radio button for a second longer than necessary. "Unit requesting backup inside Marietta Square Mall," he says. "Retail store, non-compliant employee interfering with an investigation." He releases it and looks straight at Nylah. "You just made this bigger than it needed to be," he says. Nylah stands where she is, keeping a small but deliberate distance between herself and him inside the employee area. "No, you did." There's movement near the front of the store now. A couple more people have stopped. Someone whispers something to another shopper. The tension is no longer contained, it's visible. Braddock notices it too. "Everybody needs to mind their business," he says loudly, glancing toward the customers. "This is a police matter." Then he turns back to Nylah, voice dropping again. "Log in, right now." "I've already told you I can't," she replies. He steps closer again, closing the gap. "You keep saying that like it means something. It doesn't." "It does," she says. "You don't have the authority to demand access to protected customer data without a warrant." "There you go again, acting like you know more than you do." "I know enough," she says. That answer lands wrong. Braddock's expression hardens, and he shifts his stance slightly, positioning himself between her and the exit from behind the counter. "You're not going anywhere," he says. "I'm at work. I'm not trying to go anywhere." "Good. Then stay right there and stop making this harder." Nylah doesn't respond. Instead, she glances briefly toward the front of the store, not for help, just aware of the situation expanding. Braddock notices it too. "Yeah, look at them," he says quietly. "They think this is something it's not." "What is it then?" Nylah asks. "It's simple," he says. "I asked for cooperation, you refused." "I asked for a reason," she replies again. He shakes his head. "You don't get it," he says. "When an officer asks you for something, you comply. That's how this works." "That's not how the law works," she says. That word again, law. It keeps hitting the same nerve. Braddock exhales sharply and runs a hand over his head, pacing once behind the counter again. "I don't have time for this," he mutters. Then he stops and turns back to her. "What's your name?" he asks. "Nylah." "Full name?" "Nylah Adebayo." He pauses slightly at that. "Yeah, of course," he says under his breath. It's quiet, but clear enough. Nylah notices it. "What does that mean?" she asks. "Nothing," he says quickly. "Just answer the questions." "You didn't ask a question." His patience is thinning. "I'm asking now, what were you doing in here before I came in?" "Working." "Doing what?" "My job." He stares at her for a second, clearly irritated by the short answers. "You think this is a game?" "No, I think you're overstepping." That's enough. Braddock steps in again, closer than before, his voice dropping but more intense. "You need to be very careful. because right now you're walking a fine line." "A fine line for what?" she asks. "For obstruction, for interfering with a police investigation." "I'm not interfering. You haven't even explained what you're investigating." "I don't have to explain that to you," he snaps. "You do if you're asking me to break policy and the law." That word again. Break. Law. It keeps hitting the same nerve. Braddock looks away for a second, jaw tight, then back at her. "You people always make this harder than it needs to be." There it is again. Not loud, not shouted, but clear. Nylah doesn't react emotionally. She just looks at him. "Say exactly what you mean," he replies. "I said what I said." A brief silence follows. Then the radio on his shoulder crackles. "Copy that, unit en route," a voice responds. Braddock nods slightly, like that confirms something for him. "Good," he says, "because clearly you're not getting it." "I understand exactly what's happening," Nylah says. "Oh yeah? Then explain it." "You're trying to force access to records you're not legally allowed to have, and you're doing it without proper authority." He lets out a short laugh. "Listen to yourself," he says. "You really think any of that matters right now?" "Yes," she says, "it does." He steps toward the computer again. "Move," he says. "No," she replies. That's when he reaches past her toward the keyboard. Nylah immediately shifts, blocking him without touching him. "You're not accessing that system." "Watch me," he snaps. He tries again, more forcefully this time, pushing slightly past her shoulder. "Stop," she raises her voice now. "Then get out of the way," he says. "I'm not letting you violate store policy or customer privacy." "Store policy," he repeats. "You think store policy outranks me?" "I think the law does," she says. That does it. Braddock's hand comes up again, grabbing her upper arm this time, firmer than before. "I said move," he says. "Let go," Nylah responds immediately. "Not until you stop interfering." "You're the one escalating this," she says. "Because you won't listen," he snaps. "I am listening. You're just not saying anything lawful." For a moment, neither of them moves. Then he releases her abruptly, like he's trying to reset control. He steps back, breathing heavier now, scanning the store again. More people are watching. Phones are definitely out now. Braddock notices that. And that's when his tone shifts again, less impulsive, more calculated. "All right," he says slowly, "since you want to do this the hard way." He reaches for his radio again. "We might need mall security involved too. Employee is actively refusing to comply." Nylah exhales quietly, steadying herself. But she doesn't back down. And now, with backup on the way and more eyes on the situation, the pressure inside that store is about to increase even further. The radio goes quiet again. For a few seconds, no one speaks. Braddock stands a few feet away from Nylah now, watching her closely. Not the same rushed aggression from before. This is more controlled, more deliberate, like he's thinking through his next move instead of reacting. Nylah adjusts her stance slightly behind the counter, keeping herself between him and the system. Her breathing is steady again. From the front of the store, a voice cuts in. "Hey, what's going on here?" Mall security. A uniformed guard steps inside, mid-40s, scanning the scene quickly, the officer behind the counter, the customers watching, the tension already obvious. Braddock doesn't turn fully toward him. "Police matter," he says. "Stay out of it." The guard hesitates, then looks at Nylah. "Ma'am?" he asks. Nylah answers calmly. He's trying to access customer records without a warrant. That gets the guard's attention. He looks back at Braddock. "Sir, if this involves store data, there's a process." "I said stay out of it," Braddock cuts in sharply. The guard raises his hand slightly, stepping back but not leaving. "All right," he says, "I'm just here to make sure things don't escalate." Braddock lets out a quiet scoff. "They already escalated," he says, glancing at Nylah, "because she won't cooperate." "I'm following the law," Nylah replies. There's a brief pause. Then Braddock steps forward again, not rushing this time, just closing the space slowly. "You keep saying that," he says, "like it's going to change something." "It should," she replies. He studies her face, like he's trying to figure out why she hasn't cracked yet. Most people would have by now. "You're not as smart as you think you are," he says. Nylah doesn't react to the insult. Instead, she speaks clearly. "You don't have a warrant," she says, "you don't have consent, and you haven't articulated probable cause." The wording lands differently this time. Not just resistance, precision. Braddock's expression shifts slightly. "What did you just say?" he asks. "I said you haven't articulated probable cause," Nylah repeats. The store is quiet enough now that every word carries. Even the customers seem to lean in slightly, listening. Braddock glances briefly toward the front again, aware of the attention, then back at her. "You think throwing legal terms around is going to help you?" he says. "I'm not throwing anything around. I'm being clear." He shakes his head again, but there's hesitation now, small but visible. "You're still refusing a direct order," he says. "It's not a lawful order," she replies. "You don't decide that," he says. "I do when it involves violating protected data." That word again, protected. It slows him down. Braddock looks at the computer, then back at her. "You're telling me," he says slowly, "that you're willing to risk being arrested over this." "If that's what you decide to do, then that's your decision," Nylah says. There's no fear in her voice, no panic, just clarity. That throws him off more than anything else. "You really think that's going to go well for you?" he asks. "I think the law will speak for itself," she replies. Another pause, longer this time. The security guard shifts slightly near the front, clearly unsure how far this is about to go. Braddock notices, then his radio crackles again. "Units arriving," the voice says. He nods once. "Good," he replies quietly. Then he looks back at Nylah. "Let's see how confident you are in a few minutes." Nylah doesn't respond, but her posture stays the same, steady, controlled. Braddock steps back slightly now, creating just enough distance to reposition himself near the edge of the counter, not retreating, just resetting. "You could have made this easy," he says. "You could have followed the law," she replies. That lands. He doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he watches her again, longer this time. There's something different in his expression now. Not respect, not agreement, but uncertainty. It's subtle, but it's there. He looks toward the entrance of the store as footsteps approach, heavier, faster. Backup. 2 more officers appear at the front, scanning the situation quickly before stepping inside. "What we got?" one of them asks. Braddock gestures toward Nylah. "Non-compliant, refusing to provide records tied to an active investigation." The second officer looks at Nylah briefly. "What records?" he asks. Braddock answers before she can. "Store transaction data." The officer pauses. "Do we have a warrant?" That question hangs in the air. For a second, no one speaks. Braddock's jaw tightens slightly. "We're working on that," he says. Nylah speaks calmly. "He doesn't have one." The 2 officers exchange a quick look. It's small, but noticeable. Braddock sees it, and he doesn't like it. "She's obstructing," he adds quickly, "refusing a lawful order." The first officer looks back at him. "What's the probable cause?" That lands harder than anything so far, because now it's not coming from her, it's coming from one of his own. Braddock hesitates, just for a second, but it's enough. Nylah watches him closely, and for the first time since this started, the pressure in the room isn't entirely on her anymore. The question hangs there. What's the probable cause? One of the responding officers is still looking directly at Braddock, waiting for a clear answer. Braddock shifts his weight slightly, glancing between them and then back at Nylah. "I already explained," he says. "Suspicious activity tied to this location." "That's not specific," the second officer replies. "What activity?" Braddock's jaw tightens again. "She came out of the back with a bag, wouldn't cooperate, refused access to records." The officer doesn't look convinced. "That's not probable cause," he says. There's a pause, and for the first time since this started, Braddock doesn't immediately push back. Nylah stands where she is, her voice calm when she speaks. "He never identified an investigation," she says. "He never gave a reason. He just demanded access." The first officer nods slightly, still watching Braddock. "Do you have anything tying her to a specific case?" he asks. Braddock exhales through his nose, clearly irritated now. But the tone has changed. The confidence from earlier isn't as solid. "We're still looking into it," he says. "That's not enough," the officer replies. Another pause. The customers near the front are still watching. One of them shifts position, trying to get a clearer view. The security guard stays where he is, quiet but alert. Braddock notices all of it. Then he looks back at Nylah. "You're making it seem like something it's not," he says. "I'm stating exactly what happened," she replies. He shakes his head again, but there's less force behind it now. "You refused a direct order," he says. "It wasn't lawful," she responds. The second officer steps slightly closer. "Sir," to Braddock, more controlled now, "we can't compel access to private business records without a warrant or clear exigent circumstances." Braddock doesn't answer right away. He looks at the computer again, then at Nylah, then back at the officers. For a moment, it looks like he's deciding whether to push this further. "You're just going to take her word for it?" he asks. "We're going off procedure," the first officer replies. That lands. Braddock lets out a short breath, running his head over again. This is exactly the problem. Every time, same situation. No one responds to that. Nylah speaks instead. "You walked in here and demanded protected data without legal authority," she says. "That's the situation." Braddock looks at her, irritation still there, but it's mixed with something else. Frustration, because this isn't going the way he expected. "You could have just cooperated," he says again. "And you could have followed the law," she replies. Another pause, longer this time. The first officer finally breaks it. "All right, we're not getting records without a warrant." That's it. Clear, direct. Braddock doesn't argue immediately. He looks around the store again, at the customers, the phones, the security guard, the other officers, then back at Nylah. The control he had at the beginning is gone. Not completely, but enough. "We're not done here," he says to her. Nylah doesn't react. "You're free to come back with proper documentation," she says. That response lands differently now. Not defiant, just factual. Braddock holds her gaze for a second longer, then looks away first. "Let's go," one of the officers says quietly to him. There's a brief hesitation. Then Braddock steps back from behind the counter, moving toward the front of the store. The other officers follow. As they reach the entrance, one of them pauses briefly, glancing back at Nylah. "You handled that well," he says quietly. Nylah gives a small nod. "I just followed procedure." He nods back, then leaves. The store slowly starts to return to normal. Customers begin moving again, conversations picking up in low voices. The tension doesn't disappear immediately. It lingers, but the confrontation is over. Behind the counter, Nylah exhales once, steady. She adjusts her posture, then turns back toward the terminal like she was before. No rush, no visible panic, just control. Near the front, the security guard steps a little closer. "Are you all right?" he asks. "I'm fine," she says. He nods. "If you need anything documented, let us know." "I will," she replies. He gives one last look toward the exit, then steps back. Outside the store, Braddock walks ahead of the others, his pace slightly faster than before. He doesn't say anything, but the situation has already shifted. What started as a one-sided demand didn't end that way, and inside the store, with nothing more than a clear understanding of the law and the decision not to back down, Nylah made sure of that. If this situation made you think, drop a comment below and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to Culture Scope for more real stories like this.